that we already know has gored or that has the potential to gore, and you don't have this thing fenced in or chained up. That is, negligence is where you have a responsibility to do some things to make sure that what you have or where you are is not a danger to other people. And you have failed to do diligence to protect others. That's negligence. Accidental is where it's just accidental. There was no requirement for you to do anything to prevent what happened, other than to try to not do it. All right. So, murder.
That's only 4.
Huh?
That was only 4.
No, there's self-defense, defense of property, capital punishment, negligence, and accidental. All right, so for murder, you have to go to Joshua chapter 20, verses 4 to 6 to see the 6 cities of refuge. And then Judges chapter 20. Actually, all of 19 and 20. This is where we have, in the book of Judges, at the very end of the book of Judges, the Gibeonite man brings his concubine to the town of Gibeah, and she is eventually raped all night, left for dead. This is like the worst.
That's the worst.
It's the
What's
worst.
up with that anyway?
It's messed up. And here's what happens. He then, her husband, he gets this idea. Well, Saul takes this idea later on. Saul cuts up a donkey into 12 parts and sends it to each of the tribes to say, you have to come to the Confederation Army. This man chops his concubine, this woman, up into 12 parts and sends this out. Read the story. I don't even want to get into this story. It's messed up. 19, 20, and 21 of Judges deal with the worst case of murder. All right. Next, adultery. Adultery. 1 Samuel chapter 11. When kings went out to battle, David did not go out to battle. He has relations with Bathsheba, and the text here uses the same word for adultery that we have in the Ten Commandments. So 2 Samuel chapter 11, adultery. Last one.
Second or first? Was it second or first?
Yeah.
2 Samuel chapter 11. 2 Samuel chapter 11. False witness. You're not allowed to be a false witness against your neighbor. You can't go to court and stand up in front of other people and say that this is what they did when that's not what happened. You're bearing false witness. It's in a court case. Go quickly with me to Deuteronomy chapter 19. Deuteronomy chapter 19. And look at verse 15. Deuteronomy 19:15. It says this, verse 15. One witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or any sin that he commits. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses the matter shall be established. If a false witness rises against any man to testify against him of wrongdoing, then both men in the controversy shall stand before the Lord, before the priest and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall make careful inquiry, and indeed if the witness is a false witness who has testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So you shall put away the evil from among you. So if what would have happened to that individual would be death, and you were witnessing against them, then death happens to you if we prove you're a false witness under cross-examination. Measure for measure. Okay, now, the classic case of false witness, 1 Kings chapter 21. 1 Kings chapter 21. You're familiar with this narrative. There's a man by the name of Ahab. He has a Phoenician wife by the name of Jezebel. Right next to the royal land that is owned by Ahab, there's a man by the name of Naboth. And Naboth is asked by King Ahab, hey, I'll tell you what, I'll trade you for a bigger piece of property. I'll give you a bigger piece of property if you'll give me your property. Or I'll give you a boatload of money for your property. And Naboth says to the king, no deal, because this is ancestral land. It belongs to my ancestors. I don't have the right to sell it. Ahab pouts and he won't eat, and his wife Jezebel says, hey, don't worry, I'll get the land for you. she conjures up two witnesses who say in open court that Naboth blasphemed God. So if you blaspheme God and you own property, the property reverts to the crown. So Naboth gets his land taken away. He dies. They stone him because he blasphemed, and it's because of two false witnesses. And King Ahab takes his land, and he's down there walking in Naboth's vineyard. He wants to make a vegetable garden out of it, Ahab does. He's down there walking, and Elisha comes to him and says, "Hey, nice piece of property you got here. How'd you get this?" He says, "Well, he's belonged to a guy named Naboth, but that guy, he blasphemed God, so I got the property." And Elijah says to him, you're going to be killed, and the dogs are going to lick up your blood, and they're going to lick up your wife's blood. And sure enough, he goes into battle. He's in a chariot. He dies in the chariot. His blood is spilled all over the chariot, and they're washing the chariot out with water, and the dogs come and they drink the water that has Ahab's blood in it. The guys go back into town, and Jezebel is standing there at the window, and he says to the guys, "Throw her down." And they do. The horses come and run over her body, and the dogs come and lick up her blood. Just like Elisha said. Both of them.
Is this in the same day?
And now, let's go to lunch. Now that we've dealt with all these lovely narratives,
One more.
Interesting.
actually, here's what's interesting. The last three that we dealt with, which were Naboth's vineyard, David with Bathsheba, and Achan with the stolen things from the city of Jericho, all three of those mention the word for covet. There's not a specific text that shows a violation just by itself of the word covet, but those three texts all have our word in Exodus chapter 20 for coveting. You have Achan who covets things, you have David who covets a woman, and you have Ahab who covets land. So coveting is really one of those major things because it leads to other things. It's the prior mental aspects that go into the actions that lead to bad things happening.
The precursor.
It's the precursor. By the way, this goes against those who say, I've heard this many times as one who loves the Torah. I've heard people say, well, the Torah is only concerned with what one does. It's only concerned with your actions. Whereas Jesus, he says, it's okay. It's not, the Torah says it's not good to murder. But Jesus, being better, he says you can't even hate. Never mind that Leviticus says you can't hate your brother in your heart. And the Old Testament says you can't commit adultery. But Jesus, being much better than that, says, no, you can't even lust. Because he's dealing with the inner man. Well, what is coveting dealing with, if not the inner person? Because I can't see anybody here covet. If one of you pulls out a gun and shoots another person, I can see that. But if you're just sitting there in your chair, I can't see whether you're coveting or not. Only God knows whether you covet. So, it's not something that we can adjudicate. It's not something judges can say, well, it looks like you've been coveting, and so we're going to have to fine you. You just can't do that. So nobody can see that. All right. Any questions or comments? Yes.
I was thinking that it's interesting. Coveting seems to be the precursor to the actual physical sin.
Yes.
And it's interesting how, it seems to not only for those three, but it probably could be a precursor to the other ones.
It is. I think in many ways with the other ones, it is also a precursor. But with those three for sure, the text mentions our word for coveting in each of those narratives. If we were to read those narratives, if we read them fully, you'd see that coveting was mentioned in all three of them.
So you should, out of the heart cannot speak. So, if that go with it, well, heck, what's happening inside you first. And so
yeah, if you look at Deuteronomy chapter 5, it also mentions the word, it mentions both the word that's mentioned twice in Exodus for desire, if you look at Deuteronomy, it mentions 2 different words, which also deal with the idea of coveting. So, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that in my career for many, many years, I've worked with many victims of sexual abuse, perpetrators and victims, and some that are both. And there is such an element of evil that happens with sexual abuse. And in all my years of work and study, the sexual demons, incubus and succubus, transfer during sexual abuse and actually really can inhabit that part of a person's being. And you're not even aware of it until something triggers and raises that spirit up. And without true deliverance, spiritual deliverance of those evil demons, people are never free.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, because I think that there's an element of the demonic clearly in that kind of action. So until somebody actively chooses to break the cycle in those instances and says, you know, I will cognitively, with God's help, break this cycle, it doesn't happen. If you just go on your path in a merry way and think, well, okay, we're just going to keep going without really consciously saying, okay, God, I need your help to break this, it won't happen. All right.